Got it. Streaming. Yay. Okay. Here we go, everybody. Training Tuesday. So great to see you guys. So this is me just talking because at the beginning, when we just get started, it's never quite clear when we're actually recording. And I know there's been a few times you guys have just seen me, we're recording, just seen me staring at the screen. And I never intend to do that. I do love being here with all of you. Thank you so much for showing up for Training Tuesdays. Lori's in the house. Hey, darling. How you doing? Nice to see you. I know, Rhonda, you're here as well. So great that you're here live. I love when you guys show up live when you can. It's so beautiful to share space with you. Thank you so much. For those of you who are watching on the replay, equally delighted that you're here as well. Thank you for taking time to tune in and get some tidbits, as Lori calls them. I'm still not sure how to change the name. It's Training Tuesday, it's Training Tidbits, it's all the things. Our objective here on Tuesdays is to support you as practitioners, both manual and movement practitioners, in moving the needle on your functional anatomy knowledge, on the way you run your practice, on earning a good living, on all the things that we get to do as practitioners to be in support. And I'm here to pour into you every Tuesday at noon Eastern. So thank you for being here. If you've not been here before and we haven't met, my name is Gina Schatz. I'm both a manual and movement practitioner. I have been licensed this month for 30 years, 30 years. And I've been a full-time practitioner in that entire time, which matters to the conversation we're going to have today. And so I also developed the Schatz method, which is a trademark method of working along the way clinically. I developed it as I was working clinically with my own peeps. And I share the love with other practitioners who are interested in learning that way of working as well. So thank you for being here. If you've been here a million times, I love it. Thank you for being back. I love sharing space with you. I realize in the last few weeks, we've had quite a few Schatz method mastery practitioners in the house. So it's interesting how the conversation can shift depending on who's here and who's asking the questions. So Lori, thank you again for being here. I wanna just brag about you for a minute. Can I brag about you? Yeah, okay, good, thanks. So Lori's one of my most favorite people on the planet, and that evolved over time because we spent a lot of time working together as clients and practitioners and colleagues. And Lori is a graduate of the Mastery Practitioner Training Program. In fact, she ran through it the first time when it was messy, when I was nervous and holding myself back and not being confident, which I know as practitioners we can all relate because we've all been there. And so here we are all these years later, and Lori's just rocking it out. She's a proud studio owner of one of the most beautiful boutique studios I've ever been in. And I'm happy to call that home for my clients now, since the last few years have switched things around in brick and mortar spaces. I now work out of that space as well. So it's beautiful. And yeah, if you haven't yet worked with Lori, I highly recommend her. So yeah, so jump in on that. Speaking of working, there's something on my heart that I wanted to talk about today. And I tried to talk myself out of it, and I realized that wasn't going to happen. And for those of you who've had this conversation with me before, you know that I'm a firm believer that whatever's on our heart, whatever we're dreaming of, whatever we're desiring, whatever we wish and hope for in our future has been put there for a reason. So we didn't think it conceptually. It became like an energy frequency, if you will. It became its own vibration. And I believe that as we're connected in the world, that those dreams are placed on our heart on purpose. And if they are on our heart, that means that they're meant to be ours. Otherwise, we wouldn't be like, I don't believe that the universe dangles carrots in front of us. Like, oh, here, you want this? Have fun trying to want that your whole life. I don't believe that's how it works. In fact, I believe the opposite. I believe that when there is a dream on your heart, it's because you're meant to live it out in this lifetime, because you being in that vision, in that dream, supports many other people, and that's your contribution on the planet. So there's a deep philosophy behind this reason why I couldn't let go of the topic for today. And the topic for today is about how we work and about the money that we make and whether we're thriving as practitioners. And it's been on my heart for a long time. In fact, one of the values that I have around practitionership is value for value. And in day one of our mastery training program, I mentioned that. We talk about it in a group setting, that we get to bring value to the table and we get to earn our value and our worth on the receiving end of that. And as a curator of continuing education, it mattered to me that I create value so that when folks are learning from me and that they're spending their time and their resources learning from me, that I provide value and they receive value for that. And then in the receiving of that value, they become more valuable as practitioners, and then they receive more value as they give more value to the people they serve. So it becomes an evolutionary, expansive domino effect, if you will. And for a long time, before I developed my method, I was searching for an answer. I had a dream on my heart that I wanted to work a certain way and I wanted certain results, and I couldn't let that go. And again, if the dream is on your heart, it's because it's there. You're supposed to do something with it. And thank God I believed at the time that when dreams are on our heart, we're meant to follow them, because I might not have developed a method if I hadn't continued to pursue the dream. I would have, I don't know, become tired or doubtful or something and let it go. Don't ever give up on your dreams. Don't ever give up on your dreams, ever, ever. So along the way, I was looking for answers that I didn't have yet and taking a ton of continuing education, which I know all of you do as well. I hear from you about how steeped in knowledge you are and how many certificates are on the wall, you know, above your desk, and kudos to you, just like me, and keep going, because we have chosen the body as our muse and we'll never know it all. However, when we're taking continuing education credits, at some level, and I've done this too, at some level, we just take the credits so that we can check the box so that we can keep our license renewed, right? Like we have, for whether you're a movement or manual practitioner, there's so many CEs that we're required to have every year in continuing education. I know some states don't have that. I think we all get to continue to study. And I've been up against the time clock too, where I needed a certain number of CEs to fill in my requirements. And I've just checked the boxes and just took whatever I could just to check the boxes, to get the hours in, to print off the CE certificate and upload it into wherever I needed to upload that. I get it. However, I really believe that when we're taking continuing education, the reason why we're doing it isn't just to keep our license or certification active. We're doing it in the hopes that we'll be better, that we'll be better at our craft, whether, again, movement or manual practitioners, everybody, we talk to everybody the same here. So if we're looking for continuing education in the hopes to be better, then the idea, I would think, behind being better is that so that we could then earn more, or continue to keep the earnings that we've generated so far in our business. And, you know, tell me if I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments. Type in the chat here if you're here live with me. Let me know if I'm off track on this. Meaning, I believe that we take continuing education not only to meet the requirements to keep our license active, but in the hopes that we'll be better. And that in the bettering of who we are, we think we're going to earn more money, or we hope that we'll generate more revenue for doing that. Agreed. Okay, awesome. Thanks. And I believe that we get to have a better plan, right? Because just like you, just like me, I've taken 30 years of CEs, and not all of them meant that I earned more money. I spent more money paying for the CEs, but I didn't generate more money necessarily from having taken that weekend workshop. And I get it. There's different reasons why we take certain trainings. Like I've said, I've used them to just fill in my requirements for the year too, and just steep myself in more knowledge and not necessarily alter the way I work or better my craft. But when we're really making a hearty investment and we've been at it for a while, we don't really want to just check the boxes. We want to move the needle. And I'll just remind us all that the average lifespan of a massage therapist career is 4 to 6 years, still after 30 years. And the average career span of a yoga teacher never becomes full-time, meaning they still have to have another job to be able to make ends meet. And I was going to say vehemently, I really disagree with that. Because in a world where we're being replaced by robots and artificial everything, there is no replacement for a human connection. And a human connection that has the wisdom of the body, which is the most magnificent invention on the planet, has value. We have value as practitioners who run in this field, who have chosen the body as our muse. And we get to bring value to the table, and we get to earn high value, not burn out after 4 years or never really be able to make it and have to work somehow on a side job because our dream isn't really paying the bills and buying our groceries. I believe that we get to have a very lucrative, substantial, and secure profession. And I've had lots of conversations specifically in the last few weeks with several practitioners, and I've heard a lot of permutations around this conversation. Well, I don't want to seem greedy. And so the question really is, where is it greedy to earn a secure living? Where is that greedy? Where is it greedy to be steeped in knowledge and to be continuing to spend our own money out of pocket to make ourselves better, to offer more value, and then not receive that? Where is that greedy? I'm not saying go and gouge people and dig into their pockets and decide how much they can spend. In fact, quite the opposite. Sometimes what practitioners do is they base their rates on what they think a client can afford. That's being in someone else's pocket. It's none of our business what someone else can afford. It's their business what they can afford. What's our business is what we're earning, and whether we're earning a good enough living, a substantial enough living to feel like we have a full cup every day as we give of our human selves to the craft that we've chosen. No one gets to replace us for doing the work that we do. We're doing it. We are humans doing the human job of working with humans. There's no replacement for that. That is high value. And I would even venture to say that in the next few years, that's going to also almost be rare. It's going to be so unique and valuable. So when we're taking continuing education, I believe that we get to have value for value, meaning that continuing education should move the needle in some way. And not all of them do. And sometimes what we get is training fatigue. There's even some practitioners in my alumni who've graduated from our mastery program who decide that they're gonna, go off and take some other branch of training. And I'm in full support of that. Again, we've chosen the body as our muse. We get to keep learning. But when we just keep training and gathering more data and nothing really shifts for us on the outside, we're just burdened with data. We're not living a better lifestyle or making any more money or feeling more free or full. Laura's nodding. Hi, I'm glad you're here. And when we get to that place of burnout, we've actually created the opposite of our intention, which is to have a full cup and to be better, to offer more. And that doesn't work. Preach. I hope I do sound like I'm understanding you guys and not preaching at you. And this is why I know now that I was meant to say this. I tried to come up with something anatomy today, but underneath all of the anatomy, if we're not making a living, what's the point? What's the point? I was almost in tears yesterday talking to a practitioner who is so burdened by her financial situation, working her fanny off 11 days a week in a spa and not making more money than we can make at Starbucks. And it was all I could do not to burst into tears talking to her on the phone. And this is a sharp gal. This is a smart cookie. This is someone who I know provides value. She couldn't be more kind or respectful on top of all of her badassery. These are people, we are people who deserve to be living well. Okay, so that leads me to, when we're choosing continuing education, please keep in mind that the continuing education is not the answer necessarily to your problems, and I use that in air quotes, but the continuing education should solve a problem that you're facing, and you should evolve at the end of that training. Meaning, we don't want to just take more training and have more data and be weighted down by the data. Where's the data taking you? And it's one of the reasons why I added professional development into our year-long intensive, because it was for selfish reasons at first, I'll be honest. I have a method. I trademarked the method. I named the method after my family name. I wanted the method to live and grow. So if the practitioners who came into that training program and were so completely transformed by the knowledge that they had, but they didn't implement that method out in the world or make a living using that method, what was my point? It would have been completely selfish for me then to actually train for a year and then what? Contribute to the 4 to 6 years of burnout that practitioners have with a credit card debt while they're on their way out the door? That just didn't work for me. And what doesn't work for me either is being part of an industry and contributing to our burnout. What does work for me is being part of an industry where we all get to grow and evolve. Laura says, people can fall into certification addiction too. Yes, like taking all the things and not applying it. Exactly. So there must be an application of it. It's another thing. It's another time. I'm laughing because during our mastery training program, there's an implementation focus, and there's a little bit of resistance to that at times because, it's like nerve wracking, like, I want to be really good and I don't know if I'm good and how can I implement? And I'm like, too tough cookies, go freaking implement. Make sure that you're bringing what you have to the table and practicing it. so that you can be like, yes, I am a badass and I am bringing a ton of value and I feel really good about the work that I'm doing and it's value for value, right? So I remember at one point when I was in massage therapy school and I was already taking continuing education, talk about certification addiction. Hello, just like me. I was already taking continuing education before I had graduated with my license. I was also getting my undergraduate degree in physical science at the same time. So I would say more like at the time, I thought I was just immersing myself in education and yeah, cool. But I didn't stop. So I did keep going on for CEs. So let's call it what it was. I was potentially addicted to, I didn't know enough. So if I just knew enough, I could then have whatever it was I was trying to create. And it's not how that works, by the way. The formula for creating something is you must be in resonance with it, do the things that are the things to then have what you want. It's not think and then have. It doesn't work that way. So I remember taking a continuing education weekend workshop, and there was some professional development in it, thankfully. And I remember being asked to dream really big. And this practitioner had told us, the way that their practice was running and how many clients they were seeing and the money that they were able to generate, but mostly the results that they were able to provide, which made it totally okay with this person to earn that revenue. And I might actually be even overlaying my story onto what he shared, because again, this was 32 years ago when I was still in school. But I remember in that conversation thinking, well, wait a minute, if I bring really great value, then I will be creating really good value. Like you get, what you give is what you receive. Like this works. And he asked us to take a pen and paper and write down on the paper what was the dollar amount that we wanted to earn. And he asked us to like really dream big and think outside the box and make it a number that seemed almost impossible. And again, this was 32 years ago. So the number was probably not what I would write down today, but I remember at the time, the number being really big and feeling like, wow, is that even possible? And we were just asked to just sit with the consideration, what if it was possible? Like, what if it was, instead of how am I going to make it? What if it was just possible? And then you go and be your being, and then you create what you create. And I remember about, maybe 7 or 10 years into my practitionership, I remember reaching that number. And believe it or not, 10 years later, that wasn't a great living because, it was a good living. But 10 years earlier, if I had generated that, it would have been like, wow. But then 10 years later, it was like, okay, good. Like, I'm glad I can pay my mortgage and things. And for a long time, I held myself back from generating more revenue because I had told myself that I had made the number so big at the beginning that once I reached it, it must just be where I could go. So I told myself a story that wasn't true. It was BS, by the way. And my invitation for you guys and why I'm sharing this is, how many of you have told yourself a story that's BS, that your financial situation is the way it is because of what you do? And I'll tell you, the longer you've been a practitioner, the longer you've been in the industry, the more you will convince yourself that this is just the way it is. And I'm here to tell you it's not true. It's emphatically not true. I also told myself the lie that I worked hours for dollars. And so, I reached the dollar I was supposed to make, and there's only so many hours in a day, and I can only charge so much because, again, I was in the pocket of the people I was serving, or I was in my own ego. What would they think if I changed my rates? Either way, that doesn't work. It just holds us back. So I was telling myself the story about the hours for dollars. And then that was the reason why I couldn't move the needle and make more money. Also a lie. It's not true. It's just emphatically not true. And the reason I know that is because along the way, after that initial, decade in, I started moving around a little bit, and I became a portable practitioner, not meaning I didn't do mobile work, but I worked in 3 different cities. I'm licensed in several states, and I wanted to not be locked down. Freedom was a bigger value for me than money. Always has been, still is. And I needed to continue to generate that same revenue, but have freedom around my structure. So maybe freedom isn't for you. Laura's saying same freedom is for you. Maybe those of, the rest of you who are listening, maybe freedom isn't your value, but whatever it is, the point is that I know that because I was following my heart and following my freedom, I was able to generate that revenue in 3 different states, moving around. Now, I don't still want to move around to 3 different states every month. That's kind of a lot. But what I found when I was moving around was that I could generate the same revenue in 1 week in one city that I was generating in a month in the same city. So then all of a sudden my hours for dollars idea was debunked. Like it's not true. I just proved it to myself, not because I was headed towards the cash, but I was following my freedom value and then noticed how the numbers worked out. Super interesting. So I'm sure for those of you who are still wanting to move the needle on your own revenue generating creation as a practitioner, there has got to be a storyline or two, just like with me, that is not true, that you're using to hold yourself back, that just isn't true. And when I was talking to this practitioner that I just mentioned to you, the one that was making very little money, and I asked her how she felt about that, her response was, well, I've only been licensed for X number of years. Also not true, by the way. When I was fresh out of school, before I had even landed a massage therapy job as a graduate, I was working, of course, when I was still in school, but as a graduate, I was working for an orthopedic physician. So it doesn't mean anything how long we've been at it. What matters is the value that you bring. And what matters more than that is the value that you think you deserve. Because if you think you deserve the value and you think that, and you believe that you're offering the value, it is a law of attraction universe. You will attract what you believe. So I just want to offer that to us that, yes, we're in an industry where the statistics say we don't make it. And I'm generalizing between the statistics I talked about earlier. But I'm also here to tell you well, I almost swore, it's baloney, because I've been at it 30 years and I've never had a side gig. So whatever the storyline is that we're telling ourselves, we get to be really honest about that and knock it off. The other thing I'll share with you is we don't always know like which continuing education is actually going to be the one that's going to make the difference. And again, the answer is never in the training. The answer is what you do with the training, how you show up in the training, how you implement it. And you can have a wall full of certificates and still believe that you don't deserve to make more money, or that you live in a world that's filled with scarcity, and you will be a very smart, not making enough money practitioner. So it gets to be an inside job for sure. And we want to be sure, I believe, that at this stage of the game, especially if you've been at it well, you know what, if you've been at it for a while, it matters. And if you're just starting out, it matters. It doesn't really matter where you are on the continuum of practitionerhood. You get to have training that adds to what we've been talking about today. Meaning, if you go and take, if you are a massage therapist, for example, and you go and take training to become an esthetician, what you've added to your knowledge is amazing, but what you've really added is just another service. So now you've got parallel services that are competing with your time. You're not adding more to an hour in one session and creating those results that can then change what you make. So be thoughtful about that. And hey, I know a lot of things too. That's why I'm both manual and movement practitioner. I'm not saying to avoid adding more services. I'm saying think about what you're investing in and what you want from that investment, and be honest about how that's going to roll out. And if this isn't making any sense to you, or it's making sense and you're like, I don't know how to do that, talk to somebody. Right? We're a community of practitioners here who are all in it together. Reach out and talk to somebody. That's one of the reasons why this year I kind of branched out and took a risk and created a money mindset training, because I kept seeing that this was a thing. And I'm not a money coach. That's not where I roll, but I am a professional in our industry. And I've told myself the lies, and I've seen where we hold ourselves back. And I also have seen practitioners dramatically change their practice. Come in before the training starts, and a year later they are unrecognizable, and so is their bank account. So that matters to me. I feel like we all get to raise each other up. The other reason it matters is because I want to be in an industry where we're all really revered. I really want that. And some people can say, oh, that's just your ego talking. No, it's not actually. In a world where we're being replaced by everything technological and artificial and robotic, it matters more than ever that we're actually honored as the practitioners that we are, of the humans that we are, with the knowledge that cannot be replaced. The strategic thinking that we have as practitioners and the uniqueness that each client brings into us cannot be thought out by a robot. Just can't. And some people might argue with me, but that's okay, because I believe in the in the essence of humanity, and that there's just something in us that we can't even create. We cannot create a human soul or human spirit. We can't create inspiration. It's not tangible. It's something otherworldly, and that's what we possess. So we get to bring that to the table, and we get to be really proud of that. And we get to do it in a way that's not honorably poor. There's no nobility in struggle. There's just real reverence in acknowledging the miracle that we are and the gift that we bring to the table. So that's what I wanted to share with us today. Thanks for letting me go on about how we get to make a good living. I appreciate all of you guys weighing in and sending me love letters. Oh, there's another one in the chat. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Appreciate that. So that's me talking. And I guess I've taken us back to our format from a few weeks ago. I really needed to just have open air time, but I would love to turn the tables over now and answer some questions. So if you guys want to type in your questions in the chat, or come off mute and ask them, or come on camera and ask them so I can have a face-to-face conversation with you. Again, human connection matters to me. And if you're watching on the replay, you can always leave your question in the comments, and I will certainly answer them. So turning it over to you guys. Any questions that I can support you with today? Anything coming up? Laura?
Well, so this is just adding to the conversation. So I'm wondering too, Gina, and this is just like me throwing this out there, but I'm wondering if sometimes people, because I felt this a little bit too as a movement practitioner, we're paid usually cash, right? We're not like covered by insurance and stuff like that typically. Sometimes people can use their HSA and whatnot. So I'm wondering too, is some of that like money shame, we could call it, or whatever, about like not making enough money or something like that, comes from the fact that like we know, or like we feel like we're not as respected as people like who have PhDs and wear white coats every day. I mean, that's another thing too. So I'm wondering if some of that mindset sometimes comes from the fact that like we're a cash business, we're not, covered by insurance, people have to be able to afford us to some extent. I mean, I try to offer sometimes a little bit of a sliding scale for people who like really truly need it, or like really truly like, hey, I really want to work with you, but like I really truly like don't have it, kind of thing, or like a payment plan or whatever, just to like help out, but not in any way that's going to like impact me. I don't do it for a lot of people, right? This is like a very select couple here and there. So just your thoughts maybe around that. I'm wondering if that's sometimes, the issue is that, because a lot of us are cash-based businesses, and then people feel quote bad because they're not, you know what I mean? Because they're having to charge people outside of what they're already paying for medically in other situations. Does that make sense?
Sure. So the question is part of our under earning based on the fact that we're a cash business and not insurance covered? Is that the question?
I mean, partially. Yeah.
What's the other part? So I have the whole question.
I would say, are we, because we're not, covered in some way, shape, or form, is that where sometimes people are probably like, oh, I probably don't need to charge that much because, or I shouldn't charge that much because I have to be paid outside of someone's normal budget, kind of thing.
Okay. So our resistance to charging our worth is because we're keeping track of someone else's finances.
Sometimes I've had like that type of guilt from somebody, I mean, I had one time I shouldn't have done it, right? Like in hindsight, like you learn your lesson, you're like, we'll never do that again. But I had someone who did make a good living and gave me a really hard time about what I was charging at the time. And this has only happened to me like once or twice. And I was just kind of like, well, that's what I charge. You know what I mean? Like I didn't back down. So that was good. But it was just kind of interesting. And I think too, like we can't always take other people's money stories, right, and make them our own. I think that's another part of it, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, we get to work with our own money story. We've got money on our own. Rhonda's saying when working under insurance, we can lose our freedom with you're able to provide. Exactly, Rhonda. Yeah. 100%. So Laura, I hear a couple questions in your question. So let me, I'll start and then let me know if we covered it all, right? Because I love this question. There's so much in it. So first off, everything that we're experiencing in the world outside of us, in our space, we've created. So if we're having clients balk at our prices, we're creating that. Okay. And we would only be creating that as a reflection to either what we want or what's in the way of what we want. So if what's in the way of you charging somebody that makes a good living and earning that with respect is your own deservedness and your own respect. And so that person would be reflecting it back. Okay. But going back to just the tangible part of the question, Do we feel that we can't charge because we are a cash business and not an insurance business? Well, it's really interesting frame of that question because it matters how you frame the question, right? So you could say that, like, what you're saying is compelling. Like, I can see how we could maybe make a story of belief around that. Except that if you flip it and instead tell the story that cash is king, and that when someone actually has cash in their pocket and they can afford you, then that's actually a better place to be than covered under the umbrella of insurance, right? Like, covered is the key word. Rhonda, you kind of were pointing at that in your comment. I don't want to be, freedom is the value, right? I don't want to be under the umbrella of someone else telling me how I get to work, when I get to work, and what the cap is on what I can make, which is ironic because I put my own cap on what I could make for a long time. And I don't want that, right? So if we think that we're less than because we're not being governed, then that's the part of the conversation to look at, is that the less than part, not the governing part, I believe. Second thing is, there was a time, believe it or not, 30 years ago, where the city where I started working, I could tell you every single insurance plan and whether they covered the work that I did or not. And we have some codes that are, are acceptable and under some insurance plans. Well, then, as we know, in the last 30 years, the insurance world in the United States anyway has exploded, and it's just become more ridiculous the longer we go. So there's even less likely of a chance that I want to be involved in that system or connected to that system. So again, it goes back to, how do you frame the question? Do I get to charge less because I'm not covered under insurance, instead of cash is king and thank God I'm not governed by insurance, right? So there's just a different energy that comes with both of those frameworks on the same subject. As far as the credentials go, I'm not a PhD, I'm not a master's in education or what have you. I wrestled with that with that along the way as well. I would say actually my ego wrestled with that along the way. And I remember feeling like if I wasn't a doctor, people wouldn't take me seriously. And again, it's as within, so without. The key was that I wasn't taking myself seriously. And so I was making up the story that other people weren't going to take me seriously. Because the truth is that my clients were knocking down my door to get to me and asking me questions that seemed way out of my scope because of how much they trusted me. So I was making up the story that letters after my name, or the absence of letters after my name, meant that I was less than. I made up the story as a way to keep my ceiling low. We all make up stories as a way to keep our ceiling low. And the way that I really got clarity on, like, just dropping it already, now that I'm thinking about it, it's exactly what we just talked about today. I was going to go back to school for a master's degree. And I remember talking to my aunt about it at the time. And she had a master's degree. She was the first in her family. She's my great aunt. So she was the first in the family who had it. And she was she came from an affluent family and lived very well. And every once in a while, when I was thinking big, I would go and ask her opinion on something. And I asked her her opinion about not whether I should get a master's degree, but which one. I was toying with masters of physical work or masters of mental work, and which one would actually be better for me as a body worker. And her answer was conveniently not to answer it. And she said, well, it doesn't really matter which one you get, and it doesn't matter what degree you get. What matters is, how are you going to recoup the $50,000 investment in that master's degree? And I was kind of pissed at the answer that she gave me. And I sat with my calculator for about 3 days, and I realized it doesn't matter how many letters I have after my name. If I don't believe that I can raise my hourly rate, I'm going to be 50K in the hole with letters after my name. So now, do the letters really matter? No, they mean nothing. They mean nothing. So that takes us back to what I was sharing with us today. When we're investing in continuing education, how is it going to move the needle for you? And I believe that when we choose our mentors, we want to choose mentors not that we click with, but we want to choose mentors that have what we want, because they can show you how to get it, how to create that for you, your version of what that is, right? Like, you don't want to be cookie cutter of someone else. We're all unique. But I don't want to take advice from someone who's struggling with the same things I'm struggling from. I want to take advice from someone who figured out how to get out of their own way and call me on it when I do. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to vibe with them, by the way. Not everybody who works with me vibes with me, because sometimes it feels like I'm in their face because they're in their way. But if what you want is what I have created, and if you can tolerate it enough to hang with me, I will make sure that I do my very best to support you in what you get to do to create that. So we get to also be thoughtful about, it's not just sometimes in our industry, it's like the vibe, and if it feels good, and okay, cool. And let's be smart about it. Would it feel good for me to have, master's letters after my name? Sure. But the 50K in debt wouldn't feel good. So we got to be practical about it too. So I don't know, did that answer your question, Laura? About insurance billing and extra credentials? Did that sort of?
For sure. And it's funny too, because I've even run across people who, in not settings where I was even like posing as like my professional self, but I was just like a part of the setting, you know what I mean? Like an observer, where people have actually like said like, they only trust like medical professionals or people that like, and it was just really interesting to me because I was just like, wow, you're kind of like cutting off a lot of really like knowledgeable people, you know what I mean? But again, that's their own story and their own perception. You can't, you're just kind of like, okay, well, that's you. So, right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is them. And I would just ask us, because we get to continue to evolve into our greatest all the time. And I would say that when I'm experiencing a lot of similarities in how people show up around me, I get to check, how am I attracting that? So if I have, for example, a week's worth of clients who all think that their doctor has the answer, then I get to check, how am I doubting myself? Because I know that I have particular information about doctors that wouldn't lead me to ask them the same questions. And for a long time I did. I thought that I needed to be a doctor. I shared that openly here just a few minutes ago. So what I did when I was getting my undergraduate degree is I took every pre-med, I took master's level classes and I audited them, and I petitioned to get grades in some of them so that I could have them as my requirements to get my degree. And it was a lot of brown nosing to get into some master's levels classes when I was just an undergrad. But I wanted to know what they were learning. I wanted to get in there to figure out what I was missing. I wanted in. And when I got in there, I realized this isn't very advanced. It is, but that means I am too. Right. And same with nutrition, right? We now know, how many hours of nutrition do doctors have? 0 hours of nutrition training. So how are we asking them what meal plan we should be on? How are we taking advice from them? It's like, yeah, it's super tiny. And I remember my first day of pharmacology, same thing, learning what it was led by a medical doctor who I adored, and like I had a little girl crush on her. I literally wanted to hear everything she had to say, because she was just so honest and so knowledgeable and had an answer for everything. So I would follow her around and ask questions at every seminar she would teach. When I finally signed up for another one of her courses, and she said, look, here's what you get to know about medicine. It can save your life. And every drug that you take requires 2 to 3 other drugs to counter the side effects. You get to know that before you take the first one. Is that really what you need? Or do you need to improve the quality of your life? And I was like, thank God someone's being honest here, right? Well, our clients don't necessarily hear that. They just hear, oh, the doctor said I should take this pill. Okay, cool. And so bringing that full circle then, Laura, I don't really hear anymore people saying, oh, my doctor. I just really don't hear it anymore, because I don't vibe there anymore. But I'm respectful of doctors. So what I'm also not hearing anymore is a lot of doctor bashing, which I did hear for a period of my career, because I was bashing doctors. I was making them less than for what they didn't know so I could feel better. That's ugly. That's ugly ego jargon, right? So I don't hear that anymore from people around me. So I know that I figured it out. Like, my vibe is cool. Like, we need doctors. I absolutely want to make sure that if my heart stops, a medical doctor with medication is waiting for me, not a yoga teacher, with due respect. I don't want one of me at the other end. And I don't want a massage either, right? So now that I'm really clear on my respect for myself and my respect for them, I no longer hear doctor bashing in my world. And I did for a while. So I'm inviting us to just think about, like, what are you hearing outside of you? What's the dialogue going on with your colleague group and with the clients that you serve? And how much of that are you generating? All of it, by the way, but what is the conversation that you're generating? And then where do you get to shift? How's that? How's that landing? Good? Okay, awesome. Did I miss another message? Oh, no, that was Laura's 1%. Yeah, awesome. Okay, my loves, what else? How else can I serve you? What other questions are on your mind? What's rumbling around up there? Doesn't have to be about today's topic. If you would like to have some support on anatomy, I'm here for that always. Anything coming up for you guys? Those of you who are here? Yeah, I've addressed all of you. Okay, great. Any other questions? No? All right. Let's go live and thrive and prosper, shall we? Let's go be amazing, badass humans doing high quality, high value work, thinking highly of our own deservedness. And let's get that reflected back at us, shall we? From the folks that we serve. Serve your face off and be amazing. I want to thank each of you for showing up here today. Thanks for being part of this conversation. It's a meaningful conversation each week. I particularly like today's conversation. So thank you for the way you showed up. Thank you for all the good work that you do in the world. Also, thank you for subscribing. So many of you are subscribing. If you haven't yet, I never asked for this. Please like the video, subscribe, click all the buttons and do the things so that those of us who are out there who have not found our tribe yet can feel supported, meaning that they'll find the video, that the algorithms will work in their favor. And if you do know a colleague who hasn't yet been here or who gets to hear this conversation, share it with them so that we can all rise and be part of the same rising career path. Yeah. All right, my loves, I will send all of you my best this